I think that political violence has been normalized. It's been normal for all of American history. And what we do with that is we bring conversations together with people and audiences that have never been together in the same room. That means Democrats, Republicans, non-political people, independents.
Disagreement doesn't mean that I don't understand that person, right? I could still understand where they're coming from. And I could still disagree, right? And vice versa. I could agree with someone, I understand them better, but doesn't necessarily mean I agree with everything that they believe in as well.
It's the conversations that we don't have, or that we're too afraid of having, or that just seem too complex to have, that where the secrets lie, where the solutions for these issues are going to be.
So I think the conversation we're not ready to have, I think, is how we're innovating on top of a financial structure that has been built around an industrial aid. Just wrapped up the conversation with Carlos Alfaro, founder and CEO of Arizona Talks. This organization that is committed to creating an environment to have civil discourse. More importantly, I thought it was interesting, the conversation that we had around creating a counter momentum in this age of political division and headlines that are there to be very negative. Carlos and his team are creating something that's very different, much more human. Enjoy this conversation. Welcome back to the Future Human Experience podcast. I'm your host, Eric Rodriguez. I am so excited for this conversation. We have the founder and CEO of Arizona Talks, Carlos Alfaro. Bienvenido. Welcome to the Future Human Experience.
Pues muchas gracias. Thank you so much for having me here, and excited to talk about dialogue and our country.
Carlos, thank you again for being part of this podcast. I think the conversation that we need to have is not only timely, but very important today in this era that we're in, that political violence has been normalized. We have the untimely passing of someone that's been very influential in politics, Charlie Kirk, who was within our communities as well. Share with us a little bit more about what Arizona Talks does, but why is it important today in this era that we've just normalized political violence, and what Arizona Talks wants to do a little bit different than that?
Well, I think that political violence has been normalized. It's been normal for all of American history. We sadly have a society that is so diverse and so different and so democratic that people resort to violence in times of great disagreement. And sadly, that's not the way we want to move forward. Yeah. We also have a history of good dialogue that puts your differences aside, puts the betterment of our country and our state together. Think about the Constitutional Convention in 1787, when everybody had to come together from different states, different beliefs. They did not agree with each other. The fact that they came together and came up with something that every state signed, that everybody was in agreement because they had that bigger vision, was nearly a miracle. And that's been also the history of the U.S. Alongside this complex history of violence, we also have this complex history of dialogue, of diversity, and of civil discourse.
Yeah, and that's at the root of what Arizona Talks wants to be. And when I started learning more about your organization and the vision that it has, it inspired me of what is possible, right? As we're building this human era, this human-centered space that, even though, yes, these digital tools have been overwhelming us and we've entered this clickbait era as well, y'all are preparing us to have these conversations around disagreement, around different ideas, but more importantly, a conversation about how to move forward. And I personally feel that Arizona is at the cornerstone of that, right? Because we don't have everyone that agrees to everything here. But tell us a little bit more about what is at the core of Arizona Talks, and why do you think today the events that y'all are organizing are very important?
Totally. I think that civil discourse needs to be fostered. It needs to be strengthened. The purpose for creating Arizona Talks was to improve Arizona's civil discourse. It's to make sure that there's examples. They're already in existence, right? When you go down to the legislature, at the family table, even at the friends, at a bar with friends, there's civil discourse happening between us. There's respect amongst each other. There's common ground that is to be found. We're just highlighting it. And what we do with that is we bring conversations together with people and audiences that have never been together in the same room. Cool. That means Democrats, Republicans, non-political people, independents. And my favorite thing that I hear from audience members and speakers is, I've never been in a room with this person and I had a good experience. They're leaving these events positive about the country and positive about the future of the U.S., where right now we're in a society where when we look at politics, it's very negative.
Yes.
People don't have that good outlook. And so I think that's the magic around these special events, is that we are promoting goodwill about America and its future. Sadly, it's still a special event. My vision for the next 100 years is that this is not just a special event. The dialogue happens everywhere. It happens in our dinner tables, in bars, in the legislature, and that becomes the norm for our country. Like I said, we're not inventing anything new. It is already in existence. What we are doing is challenging the mainstream argument of rhetoric, toxic rhetoric, demonizing people. That has been the norm, and it continues to grow. We want a counter movement to say we can be respectful and disagree with one another and still care about our country.
That is a great explanation of how we could create momentum in this world that's probably telling us, hey, this is where the future is going. I love what you said, the counter momentum. I think this is the first time we've heard that on this podcast, 50 episodes in, is that sometimes we'd like to think that the future's already been predetermined for us.
Yeah.
But is that counter momentum that you could shape, that you have within your control, within our communities, within our families, within our organizations, to create something very special, something that you can envision, but you probably don't know exactly where it's going to land. You just know it's going to be much more positive than where it's going right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think our biggest enemy is cynicism. It's people saying, you know what, that's too negative, I'm going to shut it off. How can we not, right? We have families, we have schedules, we have things to get to. And in life, when you turn on the radio or the TV to hear what's going on, it tends to be very negative. And so some people just shut it off. This creates a populace that is not engaged with their government, with their community. And that can lead to just a few people taking power and eroding our rights. I think civil dialogue is the first step. Everybody needs to be engaged, at least understand what's on the ballot, at least understand what the issues are of the time. And I agree, this is not for everybody. Not everybody's going to have engagement and civic engagement on top of their list, but it needs to be somewhere on the list, because that's what protects us from this political violence that we see, that we don't normalize it. I'll tell you a little story. After the event that happened in Utah, the passing of Charlie Kirk, we had an event just a few days after that. And it shocked our full staff. It shocked our community all around us that this could happen. And we were unsure whether we wanted to do the event or not. I emailed the speakers. I said, hey, I totally understand if you want to reschedule this or want to cancel. A couple of the speakers wrote back with everybody attached and said, we cannot let them stop us from speaking. We must continue to go out. I think if fear and cynicism take over, people will stop going out. They'll be scared of talking about hard issues with their families and friends. And so what we're doing is fostering and strengthening that value that we already have in America, which is I'm willing to have this conversation and I'm willing to disagree with you. Even if we disagree, I'm willing to do it respectfully, and we're still friends and neighbors at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that's where also comes into that conversation about disagreement doesn't mean that I don't understand that person, right? I could still understand where they're coming from. And I could still disagree, right? And vice versa. I could agree with someone, I understand them better, but doesn't necessarily mean I agree with everything that they believe in as well, right?
Right, jump right in. I would say people, it's good to be nice, and being in front of one another makes us a little bit more nice, because there's not a screen in between us. I can't hide behind a comment. But things like abortion, things like gun rights and the Second Amendment, things like immigration, those issues, people usually tend to not talk about them, especially when you're trying to play nice or be in family. I think that hurts our democracy. I think that we have a healthy democracy when we can discuss something as important and robust as immigration and not have complete disagreement or yelling or calling people names. You know, humility and intelligence can come together. They're not separate. And that's what we try to tell our audience and our speakers is, somebody else can teach you something. Even if you don't agree with them on this issue, it's important for you guys to be on the same stage.
Oh, wow, Carlos. With that said, Carlos, I mean, you've given us a great introduction on what the vision and what the impact that Arizona Talks has made over the years. I have also seen firsthand the impact that the events are having. I also hear from other folks that are leaving and are saying, oh my God, that was a great Arizona Talks. And of course, we're inspired of what is possible. But tell us now a little bit about what inspired you to start something like this. What is your background? Were you in politics, outside of politics? Were you tell us a little bit more about the journey to get to a moment there to realize, no, this is how you can build a much more thoughtful democracy.
I'm from Mexico. I'm from Guadalajara, Mexico. Yeah. And my parents brought our family here when I was 11 years old, here to Phoenix. And it was quite the shock, right? Not knowing the language, coming to a completely different place. I was just saying, I was born in Guadalajara, but lived most of my life in Puerto Vallarta, next to the beach. Wow. And it was so wonderful to grow up there and obviously know English a little bit and understand the diversity, but I didn't really get it until I came here. I questioned my parents. I said, do people really live in the desert? Do they really live there? And can they actually thrive? And so when we came here, I was just going through my immigrant experience. And within 2 months, I got here in July of 2001. In September, we had one of the worst attacks to this country. And that was September 11th. I still didn't know English that well. When I saw things on TV, but they didn't explain it to us. There was just a couple of kids like me that only understood Spanish. And it wasn't until I got home that day that my mom explained the full situation. Wow. That moment really created questions of like, what does it mean to be a citizen? What does it mean to go to war? What kind of form of government do we have? I think that was the moment where I started asking these questions for myself and getting involved in not only student government, but in the issues of the day.
Wow. Yeah. And Carlos, what inspired you to see what was possible in some place like Arizona, right? I think sometimes we get tied into, well, this place is blue, this place is red, or I don't agree with that politician, or there's a corruption here, a corruption there. But you still decided to still get engaged in the middle of all this and saying, hey, yes, things are changing all the time. What was that moment that you're like, wow, you know what? I could do something here, and Arizona is a very unique place to do it.
I think it was in college. I was at Arizona State University. I was leading a college libertarian / college Republicans group. And it was just a group of guys sitting around saying like, hey, how do we get more people interested in this stuff? We decided to come up with debates and talk about debates that people weren't talking about, right? Whether you go to the Chamber of Commerce or a legislative luncheon, you still don't have that robust dialogue, that robust debate that you might have at a college campus. So we decided to bring on speakers of very different sides on the Second Amendment, on immigration. And week by week, we would go from 6 to 60 to 100. There was a moment there for about a year where every Wednesday night at ASU, we had a debate with hundreds of students. Wow. That was the moment where I saw there's demand for good dialogue. There's demand for discourse. Not only to root for your side, right? You're going there to say, hey, my side might be better than your side. But it's also a moment to create an opportunity of understanding. Hey, that person said something that I might agree with, or wasn't that outrageous. I think just bringing the people together in that one room showed me the potential for this. Arizona is known to be a red state. It's known to be red-blooded, independent, libertarian-leaning. We're the very Goldwater state, which is fantastic. I think that there's a lot of that culture that has made us the way we are, the prosperity and freedom that we see. But today, we also have a Democratic governor. We have 2 Democratic senators. And you have to wonder, why in a Republican state are we seeing this leadership? And that's not, in my opinion, because we're purple or we're becoming more blue. I really do think that it's the quality of candidates. It's the independence of Arizonans that say, I'm not just one party. I'm not going to vote down one line. I'm going to vote for this issue. I'm going to vote for this candidate individually. And I think that streak is still very alive today. I wouldn't call Arizona purple. I would call them the most independent state in the country. And you can see that it's one of the 5 battleground states. But more importantly than that, it has the ability to be the model for the nation. We can be the home of discourse because we are so different. We have people from all over the world here that choose to make Arizona better. And so I believe we can unleash that by becoming the beacon of free speech, debate, the beacon of civil dialogue for the rest of the country, and be a model for other states to do the same.
Wow. Yeah, I agree with you. I do think that Arizona is in this place today that we're role modeling a lot of things. I've shared with folks that I believe in 2040, there's going to be a business case written about Arizona. Either it's going to say one or two things. Either it's going to say, this is exactly what happened in the early 2000s, and this is how Arizona shaped to be the most important place in the 2040s for the rest of the world. Or it's going to say, this is what happened in the early 2000s, and Arizona was in a great position to basically lead the world, and we stumbled upon ourselves because of either, politics or disagreements, or we just didn't have the courage enough or the vulnerability enough to go and engage and work together. And I'm so excited to see that Arizona Talks is trying to build that first business case, right? Is saying, no, this is possible to be the blueprint about how not only we shape certain parts of our country, but possibly the rest of the world, especially in this era of disagreement, but more importantly, you're highlighting that even though I have different perspectives with my neighbor, probably 80 or 90% of what we believe in is probably the same. Mm-hmm. And those headlines are just covering those 5 or 10% that create that rage sometimes between us.
Well, and it's the clickbait. I think we were talking a little bit about how we get people's attention. Yeah. And usually, I have a background in political management. I managed a few campaigns on the proposition side of things. And we learned that negative advertising was more effective than positive advertising. And it's a human thing, right? Yeah. I think that's what we're up against, in not just diffusing it and not talking about it. I think those are entrances for us to start talking about it more intelligently. Yeah. Those issues of high disagreement, those are our doors to getting in with audiences and with speakers that they come and they are expecting a robust debate. But what they get is a understanding of somebody else's belief and a better future for this country. So I do think robust debate is very important in that.
And that's a great example of that in this era even myself, I'm building a YouTube channel. I've been coached and told, no, Eric, you need to have this thumbnail that's very dramatic. That's end of the world type thing. I'm like, that's not who I am. That's not what we're trying to talk about here. This is about the future of the human experience. And yes, there's some uncomfortable conversations that we try to have in our podcast. Absolutely. But I'm not going to try to be in this clickbait space just to create drama or just to have these conversations just for the sake of having them. I do believe the future is much more human. And so how we have those conversations on this podcast, but more importantly, how we build these platforms. Because again, Arizona Talks could be called something different, just to create some drama and create some more visibility. But y'all decided to keep it very positive and civil, because that is the future that you envision.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to shy away from controversy. Yeah. In fact, controversy is at the center of what we do. It just is like, what do people leave with when you see that? Are they more enraged? Yeah. Are they more divided? Are they more likely to not like their neighbor because of what they read? I think we have the ability to, and it is our biggest challenge with this organization, is how do we promote civility, fact-based analysis, and robust debate without going and being like a political naysayer, without utilizing these clickbaity topics to try to put people against each other. It might be easier, and that's why everybody's trying to do it. There's billions of dollars that are coming in to try to divide us. I believe because of that, there's a counter movement. There's a counter reaction, and that's people that are willing to fund, people that are willing to engage in intelligent civil discourse. And we see it all the time. Like I said, it's nothing that we've created. Yeah. It's something that is very American, and it's very core to who we are as Americans. We just have to unleash it. We just have to make it as popular and successful as the negative stuff. And even if we do half of what they do, even if we continue to promote it and put it in people's minds, that's a much better place to be in than where we are today.
That is awesome. So Carlos, one of the things that you inspire folks to come together is explore these ideas, explore these different visions of what is possible in our state, possible in our country. But with that said, how does that turn into policy in the work that we get to do? Share with us a little bit more about that journey that starts with an Arizona Talks, but then ends up basically being part of our community.
Absolutely. Well, how do we, I want to take us back to that moment, that day when we lost Charlie Kirk. Everybody was stunned. Regardless of your belief on his policy positions, we can all agree that political violence has no place. We really, when I say we, our country, the people in this country really needed leadership at that point. Not to divide us, but to again, like my speakers in that event, to bring us together, to tell us that we shouldn't be afraid, but to speak more. Sadly, we didn't get that, particularly from the administration, particularly from the president. We did not get the leadership that was needed in that level. Yeah. What we did get was a governor from Utah, Governor Cox, that stepped into that role. He didn't ask for it, but he it was put on him and he did it really well. Instead of saying that side did it or you should be angry with that person, he brought the country together to talk about our differences. Not only was he respectful and came from a place of love, but he changed his whole campaign afterward. He refused to do negative advertising from his, he's still running for governor. He's running against a Democrat. He refuses to do negative advertising and then invited his opponent to come on his commercial and promote the fact that even though they disagree, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, but we still agree on a better Utah and not demonizing each other and not calling each other names. I think that's the real movement here. This is the light of hope where we can see that a person like that can get elected, a person like that can pass laws and set the example for the rest. So not only do we do this in the public, we are bringing people of influence, organizations and individuals and leaders that have the ability to change what they're doing based on these values, based on being respectful, curious, and humble. Those things bring everything together. And I think if we're talking about real impact, is how can we lead with those virtues, with those values, and say no to the negative side. Yes, somebody can become successful using negative advertising and rhetoric, but you can also become successful doing it the good way, the way that is promoting civility and bringing people together.
And Carlos, I think that's also just a reminder about what this platform, what this podcast has been over the last several years, has been creating those conversations about how we're building a much more human-centered future. And I know if you're listening to this conversation today, either on an audio podcast or watching this on YouTube, you believe in those same things that Carlos is framing for all of us and that call to action for all of us. And so again, I just want to thank you for being here with us. Carlos, before we wrap up though, I want to also just learn a little bit more about your background. You said that you were at ASU. What were you studying there? Kind of how does that intersect with this work that you get to do today?
I think it came from my background in philosophy. I was a philosophy major. And studying ideas and countries and people really leads to these kinds of ideas. And it really does lead to our biggest challenge. How can we promote all of these values? How can we promote a better country with civility, with respect and fact-based analysis? That is all counterintuitive to what we see today. And so I believe it's not, and we have this discussion with my staff all the time, is it about evangelizing and turning people's values into that? Or is it more about gathering the people that already have those? And I do believe it's the latter. I do believe that rather than changing people's free will, which I don't know that is even possible, it's finding those people that already have those virtues and those values, openness, curiosity, humility. That goes across the spectrum. There's Republicans that voted for Trump, Democrats that voted for Kamala, independents, and people that didn't even vote that have those values, that have those virtues. So when we bring our events together, we see those kinds of people. Yes, they're surprised that there's a Trump supporter in the room, that there's a Biden supporter in the room, but they're also surprised that they can have a conversation together. And I do think it's because of the values that they already have with them. So our mission is not to turn people's minds or to go against the negativity. Rather, it's to find people like ourselves that are open and humble to have these discussions to grow our mission. And I do believe there's a large majority of people like that, and that's where our success lies.
Yeah, I would always remember this class, and I was probably in a sophomore or junior. I was taking political science class, and one of our grades was to do a debate. And at that time, I was very comfortable speaking in front of people, speaking in front of students. And I was like, yeah, sure, I got this. Like, it's cool. And then the theme was affirmative action. I was like, oh man, I am ready to go. Like, teacher, like, I got this, right? And she said, well, no, Eric, your position is going to be against affirmative action. And I was like, wait, no. Like, what's going on? This is not what I believe in, right? But what she encouraged me to do was say, no, Eric, I need you to go and study this. I need you to go and study the position against so you could have a better understanding of what it is, so you can have better conversations on why you believe in what you believe in. And my God, Carlos, like those 2 weeks of me just understanding, going into those essays, going into those studies of like why certain folks were against something that I personally believed in, but that my family was a part of as well, that I was able to get scholarships because of these programs. It opened up my eyes, again, not to necessarily agree with them, but to understand and say, oh yeah, okay, I understand now the challenge to certain perspectives. And again, this was probably happening to me in my early 20s. So that, again, prepared me to this era that eventually I grew up in Texas, moved to Louisiana, came to Arizona, lived in California for a few years, that I saw these differences, but always saw myself as someone that I just wanted to go and understand and say, okay, if you believe in this thing and I believe in this other thing, why? And just have that conversation. And that's why I'm just so grateful to see a platform like Arizona Talks that is there to be that platform for others to come and have those conversations.
I tell people all the time, somebody that comes up to me and says, isn't this horrible? Wouldn't you disagree with this? Before I give my own opinion, I ask them, well, what's the best argument against it? Can you tell me yes, we might believe the same thing, but what is the best argument that might even sway you to the other side? A lot of the times people don't know it. And if they do, it makes them a little bit more moderate on the issue. It doesn't make you as attacking or demonizing the other side. So I love what you said about your story about thinking, I've got this, I've benefited from this. I'm on one side and then I'm telling you, no, you're doing the other. I think that's an exercise that all Americans should do. All students should go through, because it puts yourself in somebody else's shoes. Absolutely. And we cannot forget to do that.
100%. Carlos, with that said, one of the things that we love to do with our guests is ask them for a surprise question. I'm excited for this because we've had some common friends that have encouraged us in saying, you do not know Carlos? And I think they've told you, you don't know Eric? And so as soon as we met each other, we just kicked it off. But what surprise question do you have for me today?
I have a great surprise question that it has a lot to do with what we do at Arizona Talks, right? And that is having conversations. We want to have conversations all the time, all across the country. So my question to you, something that I was thinking about a lot was, what conversation do you believe America is not ready to have? So what conversation do you believe that America is not yet ready to have? And it could be anything, from innovation to politics, but that's what we're trying to find is those conversations that people are too afraid of having.
Oh, so I think the conversation we're not ready to have, I think, is how we are building and innovating on top of a financial structure that has been built around an industrial age. And what I mean by that is that we have built a financial sector or financial incentives, economy that is based on inflation. When we talk about technology and innovation, it should make things cheaper in time, right? Moore's law, the foundation of Moore's law, which is computing becomes faster, much more powerful, it doubles in time, and it becomes cheaper as well. We have not seen that as a reality, right? So I think it's mostly because we have built a monetary system that is built around inflation. And so that's why just in time, things get much more expensive. Education becomes more expensive. Healthcare becomes more expensive. Everything becomes more expensive, even though things are becoming much more accessible. And so we have this interesting conflict of inflationary financial system versus a deflationary innovation that's trying to kind of prop up and pop out. And we're struggling with it. We're struggling with it because we don't want to recognize the issue that we started to build in the 60s and 70s. And we're just struggling to kind of really innovate on top of that. I think AI is awesome. It's really cool. It's making us more productive. But I think it should also make things cheaper in time. And I think we're really struggling with that. I think CPI is an interesting metric, but we could also be realistic that it's also just kind of made up. And I think it's uncomfortable to have those conversations and say, yeah, things are not just more expensive today. It's a decision that we decided to make 30, 40 years ago or more than that. How do we fix it? I think that's a challenging place to be in because we've built a lot of infrastructure around this. And so the folks that are in those infrastructures or are benefiting from that infrastructure are also need to be the ones that decide to be part of the change as well. And I think Arizona Talks is an example of how we could start those conversations. And so that's something that's been poking a little bit on my end. There's this really interesting book called The Hidden Cost of Money by Seb Bunny. And he talks about the monetary system as well. And then The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. Those two books have really kind of grounded me on yes, we're trying to innovate on top of a system that is really not there to build what we want to build in the 21st century. And I think if we're able to fix that here, I think the rest of the world could follow and we could really build something that's much more promising for the rest of the world.
Well, like I said, it's the conversations that we don't have or that we're too afraid of having or that just seem too complex to have, that where the secrets lie, where the solutions for these issues are going to be. So I would continue to push and say, continue to talk about those things and keep pushing for the conversations that we're just not willing to touch, because those are the ones that are going to lead us to solutions.
Man, Carlos, you have inspired me today to go and dive into that issue, but not only that, but so many other conversations that we want to have. I'm committing here to you that I will reach out to Seb Bunny and to Jeff Booth to have those conversations here on this pod. But more importantly, thank you for what you're doing with Arizona Talks. How can people connect with you and the organization, or maybe just reach out and say, how can I do this in my own community?
Yeah, well, like I said, our organization is here to strengthen public debate and public discourse in Arizona. If any of that sounds interesting to anyone listening, we'd love for them to join us. You can join as a member. For $100 a year, it funds the work that we do, and you become an ambassador for stronger civil discourse all across the country and your community, as well as ArizonaTalks.org. You can look at all of the events that are upcoming, that you can take advantage of, all the conversations that we're putting together, and you can suggest your own topic, your own speaker. So if you want to be doing this, if you want to engage not just as a listener, but also as a creator, as a speaker, we invite you to come and join us at ArizonaTalks.org.
Awesome. And we'll have links to your LinkedIn, to Arizona Talks, all in our show notes. Again, Carlos Alfaro, thank you so much for being part of the Future Human Experience.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to this episode. I'm inspired to hear that these conversations are resonating within our communities, our organizations, our companies, and our households all around the world. If you found this conversation to be valuable, please take the time to like, subscribe, and share it with someone else. I do believe that as the future gets much more digitized, it gives us an opportunity to be much more human as well. And these conversations are part of that journey. So if you're enjoying the content on this channel, please check out these videos. Thank you.